Hello and welcome back to the Duskmourn limited set review. Today I'm going to be looking at the blue cards and how good I think they're going to be in limited, with a focus on draft specifically. If you haven't been here before, these are the tiers I use to evaluate cards. Specifically, tier 1 is good, tier 5 is bad. These are sort of a general outline of what the tiers mean. And I am just going to get started grading some cards with Abhorrent Oculus. 2 in a blue for a 5/5 with flying. As an additional cost to cast this spell, exile 6 cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, manifest dread. So, people often underestimate how difficult it is to get 6 cards into your graveyard at an early part of the game to make this castable. Which is why, I've given this a coward's grade, and I admit to that. I admit that I'm being a coward when I am grading this a tier 3. Now, the reason I've done that is I originally had it higher, but I lowered it because I said there's just going to be a lot of games where you just can't get this in play when you want. Now, in some games you're going to be able to get it into play on turn 5 or 6, and that's where the real upside comes from. Because if you cast this card, you're just gonna win probably. You're getting a 5/5 flyer, and you're getting to manifest dread, basically immediately. And if they don't kill it, you get to do it again. And then reanimate exists in the set. There's the white uncommon that reanimates something mana value 3 or less, which this qualifies for. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this card, and I think it is a very powerful card. But I have restricted it to a tier 3 rating because it is kind of a build around-y card. It's one of those cards that is good as a first pick and then is really bad as a 5th pick, and then is really good as a 10th pick. You know what I mean? Obviously you're not gonna ever see this 10th because it's a mythic, because people are gonna overdraft it probably. But good pack 1 pick 1, bad pack 2 pick 1 is kind of sort of how this kind of reads to me, and there's it's just a lot. Yes, in theory, sometimes you can just cast it. I think blue-green, you'll play this. Blue-green, I think, is maybe the best deck already anyways. But, will blue-green play this? Yeah, I think you would probably be able to play this in blue-green. You could find ways to get stuff into your graveyard. And I think this is, definitely something that's worth casting if you can figure out a way to get a bunch of stuff in your graveyard early. Bottomless Pool is the first side of this room. It's a single blue mana. When you unlock this room, return up to one target creature to its owner's hand. And Locker Room, which is 4 and a blue. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Notably, this is an uncommon. Kind of hard to see the symbols on these the rooms. Yeah, so neither of these halves I'm excited about, but I am excited about the fact that it is an enchantment in blue, which is a color that cares about enchantments. You just don't have to activate the Locker Room until you're gonna get to draw a card off it. So you just nobody's making you activate it, right? You're if you think of this as this is unsummon with enchantment upside, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And I'm okay, that's actually almost a tier 3 card by itself. And the Locker Room stuff is okay, maybe in the mid the late game you have a flyer in play, you activate it, and then you just get to start drawing cards. And that's actually a powerful thing to be able to do late in the game. Being sorcery speed removal, especially a sorcery speed bounce spell, tends not to be the best, but I think this makes up for that value, and I think this is going to be a good card. Central Elevator is 3 in a blue for a side of a room. When you unlock this door, search your library for a room card that doesn't have the same name as a room you control, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And then Promising Stairs, 2 in a blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. You win the game if there are 8 or more different names among unlocked doors of rooms you control. So, obviously, half of this card does nothing, and the other half is a tutor for a room. For 4 mana, tutors in limited, not very good. I do think you could try to make this work. The central elevator piece of it, if you have a bunch of rooms and you're okay, then I could go find the one that's the best for this situation, but I'm not buying it. It's it's something that you could go the whole format without doing, and you're not giving up probably any equity. And so I'm putting it in the tier 5. Clammy Prowler, 3 to blue for a 2/5. When it attacks, another target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. Similar to the version of this in white that kind of does the same thing, or similar thing, I have rated it very low. The reason I rated this one higher than the white one is A, that it's an enchantment, so it triggers all your enchantment stuff. That's actually it. That's the only reason. I rated it higher because it's an enchantment, and I think blue cares a little bit more about um, getting stuff through than white does. I know white has the survival mechanic, whatever, but I think blue is probably like there's some other stuff that wants to get through and draw cards and such. And I think just being an enchantment's kind of nice. I don't think it's very good. Like I'm not gonna be playing this card in week 1 probably, but like I could see myself maybe playing this in like week 3 at a heavy enchantment based deck. Creeping Peeper. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. You can tap it to add blue mana, spend this mana only to cast an enchantment spell, unlock a door, or turn a permanent face up. So that's a lot of things, actually. I would be much more interested in this card if it were a 1/3. It's not a 1/3. But, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's enchantments. There's a lot of stuff that, you can turn face up permanent-wise, like... Basically, this wants you to play a lot of rooms in your deck, but it also casts like your creature spells. Like a lot of your creatures like are enchantments, so you can actually cast creatures with this a decent percentage of the time, and that to me makes this playable. Again, it being a 2/1 scares me a bit. So I think it's just fine and not amazing, but I actually do think you'll probably play this. Cursed Windbreaker. 2 and a blue for an equipment. When it enters, manifest Dread, then attach it to that creature, and the equipped creature has flying, and you can equip it for 3. So they've done it again. They're going back to the well on living weapon, quote unquote living weapon. It's not living weapon, but it's basically living weapon. And those type of equipments tend to be very good in limited because equipment is great when you get it for free and very bad when you have to pay for it. And you're getting it for free here. Making your creature have flying late in the game can be something that's really impactful and really hard to deal with. And the fact that you were just getting that with a nice upfront body that manifests Dread, and manifest Dread is probably the best, I think, strongest mechanic in the set, and I think it's maybe not quite priced at an inexpensive enough price, so I'm actually a big believer in manifest Dread, and I think this card's going to be very good. Daggermaw Megalodon. 4 blue for a 5/7 vigilance with island cycling for 2. Talked about the other land cyclers. I'm just not excited by these land cyclers. 2 is a lot to cycle for lands, and generally the big body doesn't really do a whole lot. There's lots of ways to get around a 5/7 vigilance in this format, although I don't think it's unplayable. Like I don't think if you're putting this in your deck, you're just going to lose every single game that you draw it. But I just don't think it's doing very much to help you win. Don't make a sound. 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. If they do, surveil 2. So, it's the Quench. They do one of these every set, basically. Sometimes they're better than others. This one I don't like very much. The reason I don't like this one is that Quench's biggest problem is that later on in the game, it doesn't do anything. And this does not help. I understand that your opponent, paying 2 mana to surveil 2 is not, reasonable. That's not a reasonable thing to do. So you better hope that the Quench is working the whole game. And it really just isn't, this just isn't, you know what's even worse about this? You know why this card is even worse than usual? Is there are rooms that exist. So if your opponent wants to play around you having a counterspell, they can just open their room, and you then you're just sitting there well, I just held up this 2 mana, and now I can't do anything. This, to me, this seems like a very Quench hostile format, and I think this card's going to be very bad as a result. Duskmourn's Domination. 4 blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control, enchanted creature gets -3/-0 and loses all abilities. So how much can they nerf a mind control and still have it be okay and limited? And I mean they've put the brakes on this one. Don't get it twisted. This card is a huge cost, and that's why it's in tier 3 and not higher. Points in its favor. It is a mind control and an enchantment, and a format that cares about enchantments. Those two things are very, very good. It's a 2-for-1. You're getting your opponent's thing, and you're getting to keep it, and you're only spending 1 card. Now, the negatives. What you are getting is probably pretty bad. If it's a 3/3 or smaller, it becomes a 0/3 and can't really do much. It loses all abilities, which is really not very good. I still think this is better than your average like 6 mana removal spell, which is why it's in tier 3, but I am not actually all that excited about it because it's really close to just being remove the creature for 6 mana. You know, like that's it's really close to being that, and not as much as close to being a mind control. It still has the ability of like, oh, you get to prevent a bunch of damage because you get to block their thing with their other thing. This is Reanimator's an archetype. If Reanimator's good, this card could actually be playable. I don't think Reanimator's going to be good because even if Reanimator's good, it's not going to be functional to draft for most people to draft it at the table. So I just don't think this is really ever going to be a meta staple. Enduring Curiosity, 2 blue for a 4/3 with flash. When a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And when it dies, return it to the battlefield as an enchantment if it was a creature. So it's one of that cycle. So what I would say about this is I'm basically like it's going to be able to get in a decent amount of the time. I don't really like the cost. It's a 4 mana 4/3 flash. That's not great. But just getting the value of, okay, this trades off and then I have an enchantment for the rest of the game is pretty good. Like, that's pretty good. And the enchantment is doing something. It's threatening. It turns all your creatures into scroll thieves, which is decent. And it's, yeah. Notably, it triggers in multiple. So actually what you can do with this, too, is on your turn, like one of the play patterns with this one specifically is on your turn, attack with your 3/3 into their 3/3. If they don't block, you can flash this in, and then you get to draw a card. Pretty good. Like, that's a pretty good thing to do. So that's a thing that's going to come up and whatever. The problem with this and with all of the entire cycle pretty much is that they just die to the red 2 mana exile. But you can't have the perfect card. And the reason it's not tier 1 obviously again is the mana cost and just how like it is like it's good but not busted is kind of how I feel about this card. Enter the Enigma, single blue mana for a sorcery. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card. Not my favorite of the cantrip variants. Since the Birthday Escape incident, they've toned these down because Birthday Escape was busted, and they've reined it in a bit here. And I've been baited by many a version of this. This is not one that I'm getting baited by. I don't think. I think that this is just too situational. The fact that you can't just cycle it on turn 1 is actually very, very detrimental to these type of cards. Actually, I'm not 100%. Do you need a target? I think you do need a target for this, right? Am I crazy? Let me think about that for a second. Any rules aficionados? I believe you need a target for this to actually cast it. Why this doesn't say up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn, I don't know. But the fact that because one of the big things you can do with the cantrips is you can actually replace lands with them if you have like 2 or more of them, and you can't do that with this because you can't just cycle it on 1. So not excited, just not excited about it. Entity Tracker, 2 and a blue for a 2/3 with flash and eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, draw a card. This is just really good. I should probably just move it up to tier 1. Like it's probably just busted. Like the play pattern of flash this in on turn 3, on turn 4 play an enchantment that draws you a card. Really strong. Like that's just a really strong thing to do. I'm just gonna bump it up to tier 1. I'm just gonna do it. The reason, obviously, again, it's just too easy to like abuse this. There are scenarios where like you get to trigger this twice on turn 4 a lot in this set. Like that's like not unrealistic. Your opponent has to kill it immediately or it draws you tons of cards. You don't have to you never have to play into removal with this because you just hold it up and then play it out. Yes, if they have instant speed interaction before your turn, it feels bad, whatever. Like, okay, that's going to happen some percentage of the time, but it's not going to be very, very often because, believe it or not, your opponent actually has to affect the board like you do, and as the blue deck, you kind of get the luxury of them having to sort of play into your stuff, because if they don't, they know that, eventually you're just going to get to counter their spells and then kill them. So this card is very strong. Erratic Apparition, 2 and a blue for a 1/3 with flying and vigilance. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and when you fully unlock a room, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I have no interest in this. First of all, the stats are very bad. 3 mana, 1/3 Flying Vigilance is not a good stat line, and getting to attack for an additional 1 every turn or so is not doing it for me. So that's kind of it. I don't think I'm ever going to play this card. Basically, Fear of Failed Tests. 4 and a blue for a 2/7. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. So I just need more from my 5-mana spells. Like, frankly, I don't think this is completely terrible. There are some game states where it comes in and it's like, oh my god, they did the thing, and now it's drawing 2 cards per turn when it connects. And that's, kind of real. It is 7 toughness. 7's a lot of toughness. But it's just not super, it doesn't seem super strong to me. It does trigger your enchantment payoffs. So I think it's not completely unplayable, but I also am not a big fan of it. Fear of Falling. 3 blue for a 4/4 with flying. When it attacks, target creature defending player controls gets -2/-0 and loses flying until your next turn. I don't get out of bed for 5 mana 4/4 flyers that don't really do a ton. I guess this should be in tier 3. Hold on. It's not that bad, but there are a lot of problems with this card. Primarily, the biggest problem is it's a 4/4 that doesn't do anything when it ETBs, which is very bad. And the reason I could just put this back to tier 4. I don't know. When it's on the battlefield, it actually does race pretty well, right? It gets to attack. Your opponent's creature loses its ability. We just saw this with the 1/3. Now the 2 mana 1/3 vigilance with this is a lot better of a card than this card is, which I graded it 2 tiers higher. So yeah. But this is fine. It's an enchantment. I think that's upside more than it is downside, and I think it's okay. I think I'll leave it back in tier 3. But it's definitely not a premium card, and I don't think I'm part of the reason I was wanting to put this in tier 4 is I'm never going to draft this card because someone else is going to take it before me. So that's kind of where I am with this card. Fear of Imposters. 1 blue for a 3/2 with flash. When it enters, counter target spell its controller Manifest Dread. Countering a spell to give your opponent Manifest Dread is very bad. It is a lot worse than an Urtai-like effect where they get to draw a card because they're just getting the tempo that they're not losing any tempo. They're essentially getting to draw a card for the spell that you're countering, and they're getting tempo. So you're basically not going up anything when you cast this. It isn't a flash enchantment, which is actually the only reason it's not in tier 5. That's kind of why it's here. Might be better countering your own spell. Manifesting Dread is really powerful, and giving your opponent the ability to do that for free is not good. It is very, very likely that Manifesting Dread is almost as good as the spell they were going to cast. So I'm not very high on this card. I think it's just too much to be giving your opponent. Fear of Isolation. 1 and a blue for a 2/3. As an additional cost to cast it, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand, and it has flying. So obviously the best thing to do with this is to re-trigger your rooms. You can bounce your room and you can re-trigger the ones with ATBs. Very powerful thing to do. I think that's strong, and I've rated the card as being strong as a result of being able to do that. Things that are not true about this card: it is not a 2-drop. Do not treat it as if it is a 2-drop. It can be a 2-drop if you miss your 3rd land drop. That's about it. And it's actually good in the scenarios, believe it or not. That's actually not a scenario that's terrible. You actually can find yourself in some spots being okay, well, I'll keep this hand with this and another 2, and then I play my 2-drop, and then I just draw 2 spells, and then I didn't hit my 3rd land, so I actually play this, return the land, play the land again on turn 3. And that's actually a fine use case you're getting. You're basically getting to stay equilibrium on rate there. So it's not terrible in those spots, but you don't really want to be doing that very often. And yeah, just getting to re-trigger all your stuff is very, very strong. And this is an enchantment creature that triggers all your enchantment stuff and also enables you to get additional value from your enchantments, your other enchantments. Flood Pit's Drowner. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 with flash and vigilance. When it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it, and you can tap it to shuffle it and target creature with a stun counter on it into their owner's libraries. Yeah, I mean this just is nice, like a 4-mana removal spell that doesn't have to be a removal spell. It has a lot of different modes, right? It has high modality. There's a reason it's not an enchantment, because if it was an enchantment, it would be very, very good. It's still very good. I think you're going to play it in any blue deck and be pretty happy about it, to be honest. Get Out. 2 blue mana for an instant. Choose one. Counter target creature or enchantment spell. Return 1 or 2 target creatures and or enchantments you own to your hand. So they try this a lot. The counter spell that isn't actually a counter spell. The one from Bloomburrow was pretty bad because you could counter their spell, but you'd gift them a card, which is awful and limited. This one is closer to being good because it counters a higher range of spells, like including creatures and enchantments, but still misses a lot. Like you're still gonna miss sometimes, and like the fact that you actually don't have the buyout clause is like this buyout clause is not amazing. Like yes, you can bounce like 2 of your rooms, which again we just talked about with the 2/3 flyer, but to me, I'm just not seeing it. I'm just kind of seeing this, and I'm like, it seems too like there's just better ways to do both of the things on this, and the flexibility doesn't really help that much. If it was 1 into blue, I would be all about it because we've seen Essence Scatter be great, and this would be excellent if this was an Essence Scatter upgrade. I actually kind of wish they just did 1 into blue counter target creature enchantment spell. Would have been great. Would have been a good card in this set. Being double pipped on your 2-drop is just really tough, and I'm not on board with this at the moment. Ghostly Keybearer. 3 and a blue for a 3/3 with flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, unlock a locked door of up to 1 target room you control. I'm probably going to end up moving this down. And by probably, I mean I'm definitely going to do that right now. So the reason I just moved it down is that this format's not going to be slow enough for this to actually do the thing. And also, like, yes, it's like this obviously is great when it works. It's great, right? 4 mana 3/3 flying. It saves, like, it's gonna get you your tempo back eventually because you're like, oh, I'm gonna open this room. The problem is, it's so sweet when it works, but like when it doesn't do anything, it really does nothing. So like. That's the big concern. Not an enchantment. Doesn't trigger any of your enchantment payoffs. Doesn't really benefit from any of your enchantment payoffs. Kind of seems like it's out on its own island. It's a 4-drop. It's not a high priority. You're going to have, like, there's just better stuff to be doing. I think there's just better stuff to be doing than this. I don't think it's horrendously bad, but I also just don't think it's worth taking early enough to put in tier 3. Glimmer Burst. 3 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards. Create a 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature token. I mean, this is really good, right? So, I mean, we can sort of think about this from like a rate standpoint. First, so what does an instant speed divination go for these days? We had Quick Study in Wilds of Eldraine that was 3 mana to draw 2. How good was that card? It was fine. It wasn't great. I would probably put it in tier 4. That's where I would rate it. This card costs a whole extra mana, so that's a lot, right? Like, don't get it twisted. But you're getting more than 1 mana's worth of things. I guess not necessarily, but the fact that you're getting it on the same card is very powerful, and the fact that it's an instant. If this were a sorcery, it would be down in tier 3. It's not. All of the pieces of this card sort of come together to play really nicely together. Instant speed enchantment trigger is also a thing to think about. Just being able to hold up your other counterspells. There's not really very many good counterspells, but the fact that you can hold up other interaction and stuff and still cast this is great. You can actually, like, if there's a 1 toughness creature, you can cast this and block. That's actually, like, a pretty good use case for the card. You can use it to jump, too. I mean, there's just a lot of ways that this card gets you there, and I actually really like it a lot. Leyline of Transformation. 2 blue for an enchantment. Obviously, it has the Leyline text. When it enters the battlefield, you choose creature type. Creatures you control are the chosen type, in addition to their other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards that you own that aren't on the battlefield. Not for limited. Please do not play it. Marana Vendrell's Grimoire. 5 and a blue for an artifact. When it enters, if you cast it, draw 5 cards. You have no maximum hand size and don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. Whenever you gain life, draw that many cards. Whenever you lose life, discard that many cards. Then, if you have no cards in your hand, you lose the game. So 6 mana, draw 5 is not very good. The fact that your opponent can then, on their turn, just make you discard a bunch of cards by dealing damage to you is very, very bad. Obviously, this has cool upside, but it's not good. It's just not good. Like, doesn't help catch you up, really. It's really slow. It's very win more. I'm probably never going to play this. It's cool. It's like a sweet thing to do. There's like life. There is some life gain stuff, but it's going to be tough to get this thing to work. Meat Locker. 2 and a blue for a room enchantment. When you unlock this door, tap up to 1 target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. And drowned Diner? Oh no, it's Diner. Surely I know the English language. 3 blue for a other side of the room. When you unlock this door, draw 3 cards and then discard a card. Wait a minute, this is draw 3, discard 1. I misread it as draw 3 for some reason. Am I going to move this down a tier? Let me ponder on this. So, I think I probably am. The 3 mana to tap something and put 2 stun counters on it is... That's okay. It's not great. But this, it gives you more gasoline. It is like you get 2.5 turns from the Meat Locker. I'm gonna move it down a tier. I do think it's a good card, but I also don't think you should prioritize it over creatures in your deck, which I think is sort of the line of like tier 2 is like I would take this over like a random like 2 or 3 drop. Like I think this is worse than a random 2 or 3 drop, but I do think you're gonna play it a lot in a lot of your blue decks, and I actually think it's gonna be pretty good there. But it's a good value card. It's kind of a nice. It's one of the rooms that just that plays well with itself because it's like, oh, you extend the game and you just draw cards, so that's all good. Yeah. The Mind Skinner. 3 blue mana for a 10/1. It can't be blocked. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. So, obviously, this is a 3-turn clock in limited if it hits your opponent, which, it's fine. The reason it's in tier 5 is that it's triple blue. If you're a mono blue deck, you could play this and it would be okay in your deck, but I don't think it's worth doing that for this, especially because like if you connect with your opponent like exactly once, that's really bad for you because you're gonna turn on all their delirium stuff and all their like graveyard stuff. So it's really bad if you connect with your opponent exactly once, which I think is kind of like the median outcome with this. Like they could just kill it, but it's probably better for them to just be like, all right, I'll let it hit me one time and then I'll kill it. And then it's like, oh, well, now I'm, now I'm really far behind it. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I think this is bad, and you should not try to do it, but it's cool. If you had, like, 2 of them, it's like, then it kind of starts getting interesting. But it's too easy to just remove it, and it's too difficult to cast. Mirror Room. 2 and a blue for a room. When you unlock the store, create a token that is a copy of a target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other types. And then Fractured Realm. 5 blue. If a triggered ability of a permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So basically this is really a one-sided room. And creating a creature token that's a copy of target creature you control is okay. It generally is not a great effect, but the fact that it's a room enchantment has additional synergies. Don't hate it. And I think this is okay, just as the left side of the card, and then in some spots you're going to flip it just to get your enchantment trigger, just to get your Eerie trigger primarily. It's going to be 7 mana Eerie trigger, which isn't the best, but sometimes you're just going to do it. And yeah, I mean sometimes it is a complete disaster, but I don't think it's a complete disaster a high enough percentage of the time that it's going to be terrible. I think it's just going to be okay. Overlord of the Flood Pits. 3 blue for a 5/3. With impending 4 for 1 blue blue, and has flying. Whenever it enters or attacks, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So yeah, this is just nice, like, early game. Now, obviously on turn 3, it's going to be tough to cast as, like, a double-pipped card. But, you know, I mean, just as like, a solid, just a solid, thing. Like, you're eventually getting your tempo back, and you're playing your draw spell early. I think that's fine. I think this card will be fine. I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's okay. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I think it is a tier 2 card that will probably get drafted like it's a tier 1 card, and so it will have stats like it's a tier 3 card. And that's how I think it's going to play out. Like, I think on 17 lands, this is probably going to come in somewhere around like a 57%, 56% win rate, so 56 is closer to tier 3. And I think it's actually going to be a little better than that, but people are just going to draft it really high when they shouldn't. Paranormal Analyst. 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Whenever you manifest dread, put a card you put into your graveyard this way into your hand. I actually might. So there are things I don't like about this card. Primarily that. So here's the thing. If the Manifest Dread deck is bad, this card will be very bad. I think the Manifest Dread deck is likely to be the best deck in the format. As a result, I think this card is probably going to be good there and may be good and may perform well overall, due specifically to that. It is kind of rewarding you for doing something that's already really good and doesn't do anything by itself. But it's a 2-mana 1/3, so it doesn't like just die to everything, and it can block early. I'm actually going to bump it up to tier 3. So I went and gave it another look. There's actually not that much Manifesting Dread at common. There's 1 blue and 1 green card at common that do that. Now there's a decent amount of uncommons and or 1 good blue and green card. Sorry, there's other stuff that we'll get to a little bit, but I do think this is going to be pretty achievable. And if blue-green's the best deck, which is sort of my early favorite, this card's going to be good in that deck. I don't think it's really good anywhere else, but I think when you want it, it's great. It's not going to be for every deck. Piranha Fly, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flying. It enters tapped. I could just put this in tier 5, actually. The reason it's not is that the stats aren't like that bad. Like 2-mana 2/1 flyer isn't like that bad. But like, it's kind of like gross. I'm actually just gonna put it. I'm gonna just put it into tier 5. I'm just gonna do that. Hold on. Like just these blue common 2-drops, man. Like it's just like what deck are you playing this in? There just isn't a deck that plays this. Doesn't work with enchantment stuff. Doesn't work Manifest Dread. Doesn't do any graveyard stuff. Just does nothing. It doesn't do anything. It's not even like a above rate 2-drop really anymore. Moffat. Scrabbling Skullcrab. A single blue mana for an 0/3 with Eerie. When an enchantment enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, target player mills 2 cards. I think if you have like 2 or 3 of these, you could kind of do it. Primarily, you would be milling yourself, I think. I don't know. This is another one of those cards that, like, I just gotta see it to believe it. You know what I mean? Like, this card's gotta prove it to me. As of right now, I don't believe. And until I see it in action, and it like there's definitely plenty of ways to trigger it. I just think that there's better payoffs for doing Eerie stuff. Silent Hall Creeper. Single blue and a blue, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 that can't be blocked. When it deals combat damage to a player, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Put 2+1/+1 counters on it. Draw a card. It becomes a copy of another target creature you control. I mean, this is just upgrade, Shoreline Looter that is side graded, but I think a little bit upgraded on the average case. It's just really strong, right? So it's a 2-mana 1/1 that can't be blocked and just draws a card the first time it connects, and then it just gets bigger, and then you're off to the then you can turn it into like a 3/3 with 2 counters on it. It's a 5/5, and it's like okay. Yeah, it's just really strong. Good at scale throughout the game. Yeah, really like it. Stalked Researcher. 1 and a white blue for a defender, 3/3 defender. Eerie, whenever an enchantment enters the room, whenever you fully unlock a room, it can attack as though it didn't have defender. So the LCI version of this we saw was pretty good. I think this is going to be pretty good too. I don't think it's going to be premium by any means, but I think it's going to be solid playable, solid 2-drop in blue, and I think you're going to be okay with playing it. Stay hidden, stay silent. 1 and a blue for an aura. Enchant creature, when it enters, tap to enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And you can pay 4 blue to shuffle it into its owner's library, then Manifest Dread, activate only as a sorcery. So this card says Manifest Dread on it, so obviously it's busted. Normally, these type of effects aren't very good because your opponent can can sacrifice their creature or do something else with it, and that is true to a certain extent with this as well. But the fact that later in the game you can pay 6 mana to Manifest Dread and shuffle it in is really good, and I think that's enough to put it into tier 2 for me. Because your opponent then is like under a clock to sacrifice it. Obviously against red-black, you're not going to be super happy about this because they just are going to sack their creature for value, and you're going to be very sad and depressed that you didn't get your value. But against like anything else, you're going to be doing pretty well, I think, here. And so I like this card quite a bit. The Tale of Tamio. It is a saga, 2 and a blue for a saga. The first 3 chapters, mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that share a card type are milled this way, draw a card and repeat the process. And then the last chapter, exile any number of target instant, sorcery, or Tamio Planeswalker cards from your graveyard. Copy them, you may cast any number of the copies. This card is difficult to understand, is what I would say about this card. It doesn't do, and like it's very high rolly. Sometimes you just miss and you just mill 6 for 3 mana, which is very bad. And then you get to cast your instants and sorceries. I can't actually tell if this is a. I think I think you do get to cast them for the rest of the game. Like the way it's worded, it looks to me like you get to cast the instants and sorceries for the rest of the game. I'm not 100% sure about that. I keep pinballing back and forth between whether you can do that or not. Man, this thing. On average, what this does for 3 mana is draw you a card, trigger your enchantment stuff, and then maybe you get to draw another card or 2. I'm gonna bump it up to tier 3 and give it a coward grade. I've succumbed to cowardice and I'm giving this a tier 3 grade because I don't know what really and truly I think it's an okay value card. I do think there's like some deck building stuff that you want. Something that's cute about it is that like enchantment creature. So if you have an enchantment creature and you hit another enchantment, cool. You get to you did the thing, right? Like you get to draw one there. So that's fine. I think this is gonna just be enough value that I'm gonna respect it. Tunnel Surveyor, 2 and a blue for a 2/2. When it enters, create a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token. Yep, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be, I think, it's just gonna be solid, right? We've seen, the 3 mana 2/2 make a 1/1. It has fallen out of favor a bit in recent sets, but the fact that this makes an enchantment, I think is gonna be pretty good. I think it's gonna be a good card for 2 and a blue here. I just hard to dislike this one. Twist Reality, 1 blue for an instant. Choose 1, counter target spell, Manifest Dread. So, the more I've looked into this set, the more I'm like, is this actually good? I'm still kind of like, no, because double pipped, cancel, not the best. And Manifesting Dread for 3 mana instant speed. 3 mana is a lot, but Manifest Dread is really good. We'll see on this, it remains to be seen. I'm going to still say it's tier 4. Because it's, I think, just a little too much mana. Like, it's just a little too, it just has a little bit too much of a requirement to be good in, every deck. But I got my eye on this one. I'm definitely looking at this and thinking about, man, if, could you play this as your 20-30 card in blue-green on, week 2? And I'm like, yeah, maybe you could. Unable to Scream. A single blue mana for an enchantment. Aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature is loses all abilities and is a toy artifact creature with base power and toughness 0-2 in addition to its other types. As long as an enchanted creature is face down, it can't be turned face up. So, oh, it doesn't have Defender. That's actually interesting. Usually it makes it have Defender. It doesn't. It didn't do that this time. So the 0-2, if it has like counters on it, can still attack you. So that there's that. I don't know. I do think the enchantment stuff, just being an enchantment, is probably good in a lot of spots. I think this is not usually great removal. I'm gonna put this one actually back down because I think there is better interaction in blue, and I think this is actually gonna be one of them. So like usually, yeah, this doesn't even have flash. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna start as a believer on this. I originally was kind of like, ooh, enchantments matter, so this is good. I just think it's gonna be too tough. Like I still think the restrictions on this type of removal are gonna mean that this is not the best. Even though it's an 0-2, which is worse than a 1-1, which has been given before, but they still like being a sorcery speed really scares me. Underwater Tunnel is the left side of a room. When you unlock this door, surveil 2, and Slimy Aquarium 3 in a blue. When you unlock this door, manifest dread, then put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So neither of these modes is very good by themselves. Like 1 mana surveil 2, not worth a card. 4 mana make a 3/3 manifest dread actually might be worth a card in this set. But the fact that you get to spend your mana on turn 1, very nice. Actually good in the late game too. You can weave this in randomly. It triggers your enchantment stuff. This just seems like a really solid bread and butter card. Is it better or worse than... The real question is it better or worse than the 3 mana that makes 2/2 and a 1/1? It actually might be better, which it's going to be a day of reckoning for me. It's which one of those things is better? It's hard to say right now. Unnerving Grasp. 2 in a blue for a sorcery. Return up to 1 non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Manifest Dread. Yeah, this card's obviously very good. Any blue deck will play it. And we've seen this, this is just Mana War, but with a lot of upside. And, yeah, that's, it's funny, like, you can return your own permanents, like, you can get your own rooms back for value, you can do all kinds of cool stuff with this card, and it's just going to be very powerful. Unwilling Vessel. 2 in a blue for a 3/2 with a vigilance. It has Eerie when an enchantment you control enters. Whenever you fully unlock a room, put a possession counter on it. When it dies, create an XX blue spirit creature with flying with X is the number of counters on it. Yeah, this has obviously inherent problems. Yeah, it's uncapped, so you can like on turn 3 play this, and then next turn you go, oh, I get to make a bunch of stuff. The problem is it's just gonna die a lot of the time. It is understated by itself. It doesn't really provide you any value until it dies, which scares me. It is like if you can enable if you're really all in. The problem is it's not an enchantment, so it's your payoff. I don't know. I just don't love this style of card. It having to die too. It really does cause problems. So I'm out for now. And the last blue card, Vanish from Sight. 3 in a blue, instant. Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Surveil 1. Very solid, very strong. We've seen this type of interaction be good. I think in this set in particular, it's maybe a little worse than usual because a lot of the permanents are going to be things that already get value in the ETB. Scares me, but I think just your very solid blue interactive spell. And it's good, and it's kind of good in every set. This one's got Surveil tacked on. That looks really good to me. It looks like a nice solid removal spell that you're going to play in any of your blue decks, I think. And that's it for this episode of the set review. Please go check out the other set review videos that are out. And I'll see you next time.